Why is almost all communication coaching almost worse than useless?
Because most of it just makes people think about all the stuff that they're doing wrong, and it's overly general. So I often tell people you can tell when coaching is not helpful to you with 3 stages. The first is thought suppression. So that's like, don't talk too fast. Okay. The second is a general piece of advice that is completely unactionable because it's so general, which is like, just slow down. And then the third thing is it's a mental reminder for what is often a physical activity. And the thing that people don't really comprehend about speaking is that it's a deeply physical art form. We turn air into sound and then sound into words with our bodies. It takes 120 muscles, more actually, to do this everyday miracle of creating words from just air. It's physical.
You're listening to Mind Love with me, Melissa Monti.
So you would never give someone mental advice about some other deeply physical thing. And so you get mental advice, which is like, remember to breathe. And that whole mixture, the thought suppression, the general advice, and the mental reminder for what is a physical activity tends to just make people focus more on themselves and all the stuff that they're doing wrong. And it gets counterproductive for people.
So that's why you named your book Don't Say because I was like, now all I want to say is this is going to be the most ridden podcast of my entire life.
Well, one of the terrible unintended consequences, and I absolutely mean this, the unintended consequence of naming the book what I did is that everyone who talks to me becomes wickedly self-conscious right away. And I always say, like, I'm not scoring you right now. I'm not keeping a scorecard of how you're speaking. But the title has worked insofar as it does arouse people's curiosity. It's a bestseller, and I think a big reason why it is, and that's not to brag about me or the title, I think it's because people are so familiar with that idea of like, oh, that's right, I shouldn't do that thing, that it intrigues them, it arouses curiosity, and then hopefully, if they read the first page, they find out that, in fact, it's a bit of a trick. Because I'm trying to point out to people that thought suppression doesn't work, but you know what might work better? Some of the stuff you're about to learn in the book.
So now you even coach presidential candidates, but I want to know a story about when you crashed and burned.
Wow. Crashed and burned or
your version
crashed and burned and then like saved the airplane. I can give you either one.
Yeah, go for it. Which one's better?
Yeah. Well, the save the airplane is kind of more fun and more relevant for people, I think, because the situation is so absurd. And then the correction is actually something that I suggest people can do, even just listening right now. So I speak in very high stakes situations all the time. I'm used to being in front of people with a microphone or in some situation like this. And I was presenting at my local school board meeting on Zoom. Okay? Now, trust me, nobody's watching. There's probably an audience of 2, and they are people who are there to, talk about some totally random issue. There's no one listening. It's not a big stakes situation. And yet, for whatever reason, I became absolutely petrified nervous for no good reason at all. It was the first time I'd spoken up at this meeting, I guess, and I was feeling some anticipation. I don't know. No idea why I was so nervous, but I was. I could feel my heart pounding. But because I've been at this a long time, I decided all I'm going to focus on in this moment is I'm going to be as tall as I actually am, and I'm going to open my mouth and I'm going to fully enunciate my words, even if I say words that are not the most brilliant, most eloquent ones ever. And that little bridging activity of giving myself a very positive and very specific focus allowed me to navigate that first 30 or 45 seconds of really intense nerves and then essentially find my stride again at some point and regain command and then be able to speak and say what I wanted to. So that's a recent kind of crash and burn, but we could go darker if you want to. So I'm happy to go as many failure stories as you want. I'm happy to give them to you.
I just like to validate people a little bit because I know that public speaking is the top fear in the world, even over death for some people, which is funny to me because I get off on it or something. I love it. I do feel nervous beforehand, but I live for that kind of nerves because I know that the high afterwards is going to be so great. And I've always been like that. I like attention. I think it is, but I I want people to realize, though, that even somebody that's at the top of their game, they still have bad moments. And so these worst case scenarios just might not be a death sentence.
I want to double down on everything you just said, because most of the people I work with at this point in my career are, in fact, really good communicators who either know that to accomplish their goals, they have to get even better, or even those like supremely talented communicators, you're right, every so often they crash and burn and they have to recover. One of the presidential candidates that I've coached, he had a dreadful debate performance in the first televised debate. And we worked together for 10 days, like intensively right after that to course correct for the second campaign. Now that's someone who's running for president. So, people at every spectrum of sort of their communication lives, you're right. These things happen to all of us. And the other thing that you said that is so important and relevant for people is that it's almost a flip side of the coin, meaning you have those intense nerves, but that kind of excitement and energy feels a bit of maybe even a little gentle buzz or, electricity that you've become really fond of. And you take that energy and you channel it into the performance. A lot of people are stuck in a negative cycle in which those nerves tank them and they feel like it drives them in a very negative direction. But you can actually take that energy and use it to your benefit. So good for you for doing that. And I think that if people could adopt that mindset just from this one podcast, that's an amazing learning. So everybody listening, if you can, adopt Melissa's mindset, because I think it can really serve folks very well.
That's something I share a lot, is just realizing the meaning that we're giving certain physical sensations. How different is anxiety from excitement other than the meaning that we're giving it? And so I do have a kryptonite, though. If I am on stage and I have the thought, what if I forget everything? If I allow that thought to actually come through, I will forget for a second. I need to look at my notes. So I just have to really stay in the moment and not get in my head. But I'm wondering, though, when we get to those moments, even when we're really prepared, what is happening in our bodies when we freeze up?
Well, a couple of things I want to say there. First of all, it's a simple idea, but it takes tremendous practice and tremendous dedication to actually live it. But you already know how to do it. Not just you, everybody. We already know how to do this. The challenge is, how do you use it when that adrenaline kicks in, when that thought suppression kicks in? Because your thought suppression is, don't forget what you're going to say next. Don't forget what you're going to say next. And if that thought takes over, soon all you can see is don't forget. And, you get completely stuck in that way. The thought that I want to share that is so profound, great impromptu speakers have mastered this. Your job is not to say 25 brilliant things. Your job is to say one brilliant thing, and then to tolerate silence at the end of that thought. So you can allow your audience time to digest what you've just said, and also so you can think of what you want to say next. We do this in real life all the time. Think of giving your friend who's going through an intense crisis of some kind, giving them some advice. You do this. You listen, you notice, you watch, you tolerate silence, and you don't give yourself the obligation of, remember the 25 genius things I have to say to them to help them fix their life. You don't do that. You say one idea, and then you evaluate what's next. This is why in the book, the first kinesthetic tool that I teach is this very idea. So I have people use Lego blocks, and they share one idea at a time. But at the end of the idea, as opposed to just prattling on and launching into the next thing, they take the Lego block and they place it down on the table in silence. And then they pick up a second Lego block and they say their second idea. And at the end of that second idea, kind of like a period at the end of the sentence, they click the second Lego block in place on the first, and so on and so forth. In the book, I can't put a Lego in there, so I just use strips of paper that someone can rip up and use. But it's the same idea, an object to force you to speak one idea at a time. And from what you just said, it sounds like when you're at your best, you're doing that very thing. You are staying in the moment of the thought you're thinking of and sharing, not all the mistakes you made in the past or all the mistakes you're about to make in the future, the one in the present.
That is something that I've taken. Well, I'm going to say the only thing I've taken from sports. I'm not a sports person. I really despise it. But the one thing that I don't like watching it. I don't understand watching other people play a game. I get emotionally irritated about it when I'm watching people watch people and they're actually getting upset. I don't get it. But the one takeaway I've had is I remember hearing somebody say that the best athletes in the world forget their mistake immediately after it happens. So you can just go into the next play and it's a clean slate. And that is such great life advice because we're all carrying around so much baggage from everything we've ever done. And I've probably mentioned this in too many episodes, but I've been really into the Gnostic Gospels, the Gospels that were taken out of the Bible. I really like knowing what they're trying to hide from us. But saying 42 of the Gospel of Thomas is to be passersby. How can you just let the moment flow through you instead of clinging to it or resisting it, basically? And so it's kind of been my mantra this month. But I still find that I have a hard time relating. So I want to make sure I ask the questions that other people experience because, like I said, I get on stage and I'm like, what do you need me for? I don't even know why I'm up there yet. I'll just raise my hand and go on. But people will literally freeze. It's like their whole response system, their nervous system just shuts them down. Why is that happening when clearly there's no threat of imminent death?
Sure. This is such a worthwhile question. Look, I'm going to direct people, if they want to. We give away the chapter in the book on navigating nerves. That's the title of it. And I'm going to keep that chapter free because it's kind of a gift to the world, hopefully in a tiny, tiny way to help anyone who finds it be just a little bit better at that agonizing experience you just described, that kind of fight or flight moment. So if you want that chapter, you can go to don'tsayum.com and get the chapter for free, Navigating Nerves. Now, the reason I say that is because your question is a big question, and we could spend an entire podcast just on the one question. But fight, flight, or freeze, these three Fs, that like debilitating thing you're talking about of all of a sudden, the stakes become incredibly high and the body goes into total reaction mode. I often will suggest to people that they substitute those three Fs with three different ones. Fake it, feature it, fix it. Fake it means if you pause for 3 seconds, it might feel like 30. But if you don't tell us all that you're forgetting what you're about to say, we won't even know. So one is fake it, but fix it or feature it go a lot farther, which is you may not have to fake it at all. In fact, you don't. So very often in life, we do this all the time where we fix things. We simply say, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. And you reference your notes and you continue. Or you can even feature it, which means you make it a positive thing. I've forgotten what the next thought is. What do I have in my notes here? Oh, of course I have. And that's so important because we always overlook and you fill in the blank. Now, the reason I'm getting into that right away, those three Fs, is because I find that often people get stuck on the why. And I want to get to your point about why does this happen in a second. But we get so fixated on the why, and we very often pathologize it. We make it a problem. Why am I like this? Why am I so bad? Why do I always freeze? And we go to catastrophism with it. I will often tell people if I'm coaching them on this sort of stage fright or public speaking anxiety, that they're boringly typical. I will say, look, I know you are an extraordinary person, and I can see that in many ways. You're totally extraordinary. And in this one way, you're boring. You're tremendously boring because so many people feel the same way. And I don't say that to people as an insult. I say that to them as some liberation. Because very often they feel like a burden, even a level of shame about this, like something is wrong with me. I am broken. I am flawed. I am beyond redemption. And that's not true. And there are strategies and tactics and approaches to work on this. Fake it, feature it, fix it is one of them. What's happening is you're going into an adrenalized response. You're going into essentially crisis mode. And your brain shuts down and you go into reaction mode. Your heart speeds up, your body's prepared for a movement or for conflict, and your brain shuts down. So what you have to do is build some muscle memory, desensitizing yourself to those circumstances and using tools so you can continue to breathe, share one thought at a time, enunciate your words, things like that. And what happens is very soon you become, well, to use your metaphor about the Gnostics, you become a bit of a shepherd, helping yourself get through these moments. And all of a sudden you regain your footing and you're off and running. And if you live through that a few times, what happens is all of a sudden people, they build confidence, not confidence in themselves, mind you, because that might not come. You might never feel like, oh my God, I'm an amazing public speaker, but confidence in your proven track record of success. And that's the thing that can be truly transformative for people.
I love that. It reminds me of parenting. I've learned so much from learning how to teach my children. I think we want to believe that we grow into these adults who learn differently, but I actually think it's more of a combination of we forget how to learn and we're not learning quite as well. If we explored some of the ways that children learn, Stephen Kotler was on this podcast last year, and he was talking about basically developing mastery as a grown adult. And he talked about bringing in novelty and play. But I think one of the things that we missed in that conversation is just, again, kind of praising our own effort, getting excited about our own effort, not about the perfection of the outcome.
Yeah, I have to share a story here.
Yeah.
I think everybody who has ever tried to teach anyone else will relate, not just parents, but if you've ever tried to teach anybody anything. Legitimately, I am a world caliber expert in my chosen field. I am a go-to expert, a subject matter expert in this category of how do I help people improve speaking? And most of the time, not just what they say, but how they say it. Now, ask me, with that impressive bio, that amazing biography, have you been able to be good at teaching your children? And the answer is no. In the height of irony, one of my two kids actually doesn't have that good of enunciation, which is shocking, right? You're like thinking like, Michael J. Hoeppner, help your kids talk better. And this lesson you're talking about is something I've really had to work on in the last number of years. And of course, she or he was not so good at enunciating because they're living with this expert who's watching them all the time and critiquing every single thing that they do. It's taken me years. And now I actually have my kids do all the same stuff that's in the book. So in the book, I coach people to use an impediment to work on their enunciation. Maybe their pinky finger or a ripped up page of the book folded up. Well, I do it with my kids now, but I have them use starburst candies. So they talk with a little starburst candy in between their teeth to work on more dynamic enunciation. And then afterwards, they get this starburst treat. And if my other kid, by the way, who doesn't have any challenges with enunciation, but his challenges are more about posture and breath and how he moves in the world. So now, as opposed to me saying like, have good posture, which is the worst possible thing you could hear from your parent, I have him practice standing on one leg on a couch and throwing him little wiffle balls and playing a game with it. So it took me, and this is so silly because I teach people all the time in these very kinesthetic ways to really have quick breakthroughs and to build muscle memory off of those breakthroughs. I do that all the time. And yet it took me not months, years to learn the same lesson and apply it with my kids. So my gosh, do I relate to the lessons you're talking about and to some humility and even egg on my face about it because I feel like I should have known better. But here we are now, right? Can't change the past.
No, I believe that we are given the exact challenges we need. And so if you were given perfectly speaking children, how would you grow through that scenario? I mean, they are our little masters, our little teachers.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
You say that your voice is your body, like it's more of a literal fact than metaphor. Explain that.
Yeah. People, you mentioned earlier that you have baggage about sports, which if we want to get to that question, I do too, by the way, so we could have some fun on that one too. But
let's go.
Let's go.
Change. That's what this whole episode's about.
Well, let's do the voice first and then let's get to sports for sure. And the reason I say that as an intro is that people have baggage about their voices a lot. And it's both, meaning like I've never spoken up for myself enough. I never get into the conversation. I never share my ideas the way I should. So I'm talking about that aspect. But even more fundamentally, people have a lot of baggage about the sound of their voice. It's too nasal, it's too gravelly, it's too this, it's too that. When I hear my voice played back to me, I hate it. I hate that sound of my own voice. It's like nails on a chalkboard. You get the idea. It's very, very common. And my point with saying that is to free people up a little bit, to be a little less self-critical. It's not even your voice. We are a musical instrument. We take air into our bodies, and then we allow the air to exit our bodies. It picks up sound as it flows over our vocal cords. That's very much like a reed, if you're familiar with how woodwind instruments work, like an oboe or something like that. And that sound that is created then gets amplified through our whole body, and then it gets altered with this miraculous act of enunciation we do. And if you do those things differently, the quality of your voice changes quite dramatically. And you can see this in your own life very vividly. If you've ever said a sentence after you've had a big yawn, like, "Oh, I don't know what we should do, but we should do something." Your voice sounds totally different when you do that. Or maybe on a late night call when you're, talking to someone you really like and you're very relaxed and, I don't know, maybe reclining in a recliner, or maybe after a couple glasses of wine, not to talk about alcohol on a podcast, but you get my point. And conversely, how different your voice can sound in the morning when you haven't really warmed up and your voice has a bunch of frogs in the throat. So if you don't like the sound of your voice, liberate yourself from that critical thought. It's not your voice anyway. It is how you have habituated yourself to create sound. And if you want to spend some time shifting that, you can. You don't have to. You could leave that for some other year or decade or never get to it at all. But stop being quite so possessive about your ideas and your opinions of your voice, because they may not, in fact, even be true.
This is one of my favorite topics, though. So growing up, I had a huge insecurity about my voice. I had a very raspy voice as a child, to the point that other little kids would ask me what was wrong with me. And so I hated my voice. If I heard myself recorded, I really disliked it. I ended up being in choir from like middle school through high school, though. And I don't know exactly when it changed, but when I was in my 20s, I started actually watching YouTube videos or videos that I could find about voice technique and how to really, my focus was how to not lose my voice so often, because I lost my voice like once a week and then it would last like 5 days and then it'd be fine for 2 days. And I learned how malleable my voice actually was. And so even now, like sometimes I'm telling my husband, I'm like, you're speaking from your throat, like drop it a little bit. Like everything's up here. But I taught myself how to sing better. I won a couple karaoke contests. I'm not like amazing, but I'm not bad. And I speak differently, but it's so interesting because as I've worked with my voice, now when I hear my voice recorded, I know that it should sound different in my head because of the resonance of how I'm hearing it, but I've merged them. And so nothing's shocking anymore. And I think that's mostly people's problems with their voice, is that the one they hear on a recording is unfamiliar because they hear it from a different like echo chamber inside their head.
That's so cool. That whole story is so amazing. Yeah, you're right. So even just the last part of what you said, which is in a way the most prosaic of everything else, even that is a gift. Just forcing yourself to slowly but surely become more accustomed to how you sound in different situations and desensitizing yourself to that. Even that. Amazing. But going backwards and rewinding, it's so interesting in life how these things that at the time are just such a crisis and so frustrating and such a weight that we're having to push up a hill. And yet now, decades later, it's in a way a gift because you went to choir, you sang, you worked on this, you understood it. And I bet, and now this, we don't know each other well. I've of course done my research. I've listened to your pod, which I'm a fan of, but we don't know each other well. But I bet you that you even derive some health benefits, even if they're minor, from your different thoughts and approaches to how you speak. Because how we speak is something that can actually be a tiny health intervention in our day to day. How we speak affects how we breathe. It affects how we move. if we do it well, it might even affect how much eye contact we give to our audience members. It obviously can involve our gestures, our posture, all of those things. So it sounds like a rough road a little bit, but good for you for journeying through that. And I feel like very often, I feel that way about the book, actually, that very often some of the things that drive us the most frustration, or give us the most frustration, I should say, end up in the long run being some kind of a gift.
Yeah. And I don't even know if I've emphasized how much of a gift it's been, where now my voice is one of my favorite things about myself. I get compliments on my voice. If you go through my podcast reviews, I'd say like 50% of them mention my voice. And so I believe you when you say health benefits as well, because inadvertently, when I'm really excited or I'm nervous or something, my voice will change and I'll be a little bit higher pitched. And it's just, I come at the conversation differently. And that's usually my cue to relax into myself. And so in order to get my voice to the caliber that I want it to be, I have to calm my nervous system. And now I can just do it at the flip of a switch, because I'm not thinking, oh my gosh, you're too anxious. I'm not giving meaning to that. You're anxious. Stop being nervous. Settle down. I'm just saying, drop into my voice, and all of the other things just sort of follow with that.
So you have lived the journey of this book in a way. And you said earlier, I'm trying to empathize or to relate to the people out there, but I love public speaking. So in a way, you don't quote unquote need this book. It's not written for you, because you've actually lived the journey of this book, which is we come into high stakes communication situations and we mess ourselves up in a whole bunch of myriad ways. And you just even mentioned a couple things of giving meaning to this idea of don't be anxious, don't be anxious. Oh, you're anxious. Oh, you're a fraud. Oh, you're anxious again. Oh my God, you're anxious. You've completely deprived it of that meaning. And instead, what you've chosen to do is put your focus somewhere very actionable, which is do these physical, even almost borderline metabolic adjustments to experience the creation of sound in my body in the way in which I know I want to communicate to be able to reach my listeners. And when I do that, the side benefit is I breathe more slowly and deeply and freely. My rib cage probably begins to relax, like the intercostals of my rib cage relaxes a little bit. My height might even get a little taller, but not through effort, not through like stand up straight, through balance and release. And then my voice attains a quality that I like for the podcast. It happens all at once, right? But your attention is on those adjustments as opposed to don't be nervous. You're nervous again. Don't freak out. Oh my God, you're freaking out. Don't forget what you're going to say next. Oh, you're forgetting it. Oh my God, this always happens. I'm crashing and burning. It's brilliant. Good job.
Thanks.
Not that you need my approval about it, but this is how I spend my 5 days a week. So good job.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it has been a journey, but like we were talking with children, I think we're given the challenges that we are meant for. And so if I wasn't born with a voice that I was wildly insecure about, maybe I would have never focused on it. I just never would have thought it was my thing. But instead I started focusing, and then I was like, oh, look at the power I have here. Oh, maybe I could do this, and opportunities, or maybe possibilities within my own mind started to blossom open. But it is, to me now, so much easier than I thought it was going to be when you're focusing on little adjustments. For example, breath is a big one. And you have this brutal line in your book that when you speak without sufficient breath, your body thinks it's drowning. Your nerves are actually survival instinct. And I think it's important to kind of reverse engineer some of these things, because as you said, so often we're up there and it's like, oh, but I always get out of breath. And it's like, okay, well then stop focusing on the fact that you always get out of breath or that you're nervous, and instead plan your breaths. When I played piano, we sit there and we mark up the music the entire time of like, okay, well here I'm going to actually use my pinky instead, or cross my hands over. You mark it all up so you actually plan what you're going to do. And we did a similar technique. I did a public speaking training back in 2019, and we planned our breaths for the areas that were really difficult. And so how do you, well, first unpack that? What's actually happening with this lack of breath? Why is it so common? But how many people's anxiety is actually just oxygen deprivation instead of the anxiety?
I mean, look, I'm not going to give you, I've never run those experiments. I don't know which research to go to answer the final question of how many people. My provocative guess would be everyone. And the reason I say that is because, look, we all know when we're in heightened states of anxiety, when we are becoming more nervous, more neurotic, things like that, we all know, like, you know what, I'm probably not breathing as deeply as I could be. I mean, you mentioned the Bible earlier. Let's go to any religious tradition, any sort of meditation, any sort of thing that is striving for enlightenment. It always involves some sort of connection to being present in the moment. And one of the best ways to do that is to actually allow yourself to breathe. I mean, think of meditation, martial arts, dance, all these things in which the entire form is built around the power of unlocking in the moment presence of breath. So yes, it is a worthwhile topic. And to your point, what you're talking about with looking at the script, singers will call this, they will score their script or their score. They'll put in slash marks for where they're going to breathe, just like an opera singer might do. I sometimes use that as a tool. I use that with people who are either going to give a word-for-word speech, like a commencement address or something like that, or people who have enough facility with memory and word recall that they really can memorize a whole speech and do so pretty fluidly, and it helps them. Some people, that actually gives them more anxiety. Oh my God, I can't memorize a whole script. And so those folks, I'm often not coaching on when to breathe, but how to breathe and the quality of their breath. And, you know, you mentioned the chapter on it as an example. In that chapter, I'm often trying to help people recognize and realize how fully they can actually breathe. So here's a fun little thought experiment with it. You're at a restaurant, or whoever's listening right now, if you're listening to this, imagine this, you're at a restaurant or a bar with some friends and someone's having a birthday and you're all going to sing happy birthday. And we get to the third verse of happy birthday, when we all take that huge breath in to sing the last part, you breathe. You take a big breath before that last stanza. I promise you that. In the book, I will even have people play with inhaling to blow up a balloon at a party. Imagine it's one of those stubborn, firm balloons that really, we got to put a lot of force of air through to get it to begin expanding. So the way that we should be helping ourselves breathe is big, generous, almost like honey drizzling down into our torsos, as opposed to tight and manufactured. And anyway, I mean, I could talk for an hour on this topic alone too, but the point here, of course, is unlocking not just when to breathe, which is good, but even how to breathe more freely when you do it.
Breath gives you time too. It's kind of like the pauses that you talk about. And I know this because sometimes when I'm editing an ad or a little promo or something like that, it's funny, if I take out the breaths, that space feels too long. When I have the breath there, it feels just right. And so I always have to like move words closer together if I'm removing all breath sounds, because it just sounds awkward. Like it's not supposed to be there in a recording when you can't see somebody.
Well, here's a fun piece of pushback.
Okay.
What you just
I'm ready.
So my wife is she also coaches for the company. So anyway, I run this company, GK Training, and she's a coach within it. And I'm the CEO and founder of the company, blah, blah, blah. And I wrote the book. So anyway, I have these different sort of times that I spend in my life doing different things. She's a singer, and she sang at Carnegie Hall and other places. And she's, pretty well known within a certain section of music and different classes of music and genres of music. Anyway, she will actually coach people and suggest in the recordings that you hear the breath. And if you listen to some vocal tracks of like jazz folks, or let's call it like MTV Unplugged, that kind of vibe, not so much polished tracks with, auto tuners and that sort of thing, but little raw, you will actually hear those intakes of breath. And she actually prefers that. She likes that sort of raw quality. Now, aesthetically, if you like it or you don't like it, I'll leave that for a different discussion of taste. the thing that I love about what you're saying is that people are often trying to mask the fact that they need air, like it's some sort of dent in your credibility that you need oxygen, which is hilarious, right? And we feel a little bit of apology or embarrassment about having to take a big breath. And you'll even see people try to cheat it, make it faster, like sip it in quickly. But to your point of giving yourself an incredibly specific focus to help calm yourself and center yourself in those situations, even the amount of time it takes to allow breath to enter your body can be quite profound. I agree with what you're saying about the time too. In fact, when this is not in the book, but when we teach what's called conversational agility, we have a whole suite of playing cards that feature stuff people know. But the point is to make them tangible by putting them on cards so people actually use them. But things like repeat and rephrase or delegate or rain check or clarify, those sorts of things. And we call them breathing time techniques for the exact thing you said. They're not thinking time techniques. They're actually breathing time techniques because breath takes time.
I agree with your wife. This has been an evolution for me from the beginning of the podcast till now of just getting used to, I think, insecurities coming forward of like, okay, I have to make this sound perfect as I was learning and growing. And then as I became more confident and more comfortable with myself, I started to really appreciate the humanity of it in a real conversation. And I think I've also had a change in focus in what my purpose is for the whole thing. Am I trying to launch myself as somebody that I'm growing into, or am I showing up right where I am so that I give other people permission to show up as they are as well? So I show people that, I mean, I don't want to be the Instagram highlight reel that makes everybody else feel insecure about their lives. I want to just say, hey, like, let me share this thing that I think is probably pretty common, but we're all holding on to make ourselves feel unworthy or more flawed than we actually are.
When people ask me about what is presence or what is like executive presence, I will give them this definition. And the definition is executive presence is not Oprah Winfrey or Superman or Winston Churchill or Barack Obama. Oprah Winfrey is you. But ironically, you, when you're at your most other focused, thinking the least about you and your presentation skills and your presence and how good and credible you sound. Communication is the exact thing you just named. It is the human superpower. It is the social primate. That's what they call us humans, the social primate's superpower. We have developed the ability to take air and turn it into an entire labyrinth of 30,000, 40,000 words, depending on what one's vocabulary is. And to use those words to build society, create armies, create tribes, create religion, whatever it is, to use these words for incredible purposes. The point of communication is to reach the other person and to influence the other person. So to your point of like, do I want to be a flawless Instagram filtered person, or do I want to actually reach the other person? I completely, to the extent that you need any validation, which you don't, I validate that journey for anybody. And I think it's the right journey to have, because ultimately it's not about you. It's about what you can inspire in others. And that is what communication actually is. So when people get fixated on like, how do I unlock eye contact, breath, posture, gestures, any of these things, I will often call those things the behaviors of confidence, not confidence, the behaviors of them. And they all unlock automatically when we're really thinking about being of service to the other person.
This reminds me of another sort of controversial claim in your book that kids are better communicators than adults. And I already can see why in my head, but I can also see a lot of the pushback of people being like, well, my daughter's 6 and she screams and she whines and she uses the word like 17 times per sentence. So in what universe is she a better communicator than me? So explain this.
So let me clarify that a bunch and parse that comment a little bit. I'm not suggesting that kids writ large, like anyone under 18, are better communicators. No. And I'm saying in a very specific way. There's a very good chance that you when you were 3 days old made sound much more healthfully than you do even now, even after the journey you've been on. A healthy baby comes into the world. The first thing they do, take in air and then let out a big scream. This is why kids can scream all night long for 3 straight days and still have a voice. And if adults would do that, they would lose their voice after about 15 minutes. So one, we use much larger kind of bandwidth of ourselves as kids. But then think of a 2 or 3 or 4-year-old and how they go about trying to achieve something. And very often they will use every tactic under the sun. I mean, if you've ever lost a negotiation with a little kid, you know what I'm talking about. They will never tire of the thing, and they will do this tactic and that tactic and this tactic. And they never encounter a moment of like, I'm not looking professional right now, so I better keep my voice in the lower third of my pitch range because that sounds more authoritative. They don't do that. They simply use every available avenue they can to try to reach the other person. So are there outliers to this? Yes, of course there are. And do kids accrue bad habits like we all do? Yes. And I even talked about that earlier a little bit in my own family. Does their language get littered with filler? Yes, of course it does. But I'm speaking more about the raw fuel of it. And then their willingness to stretch the boundaries of how big they can be as opposed to how small and how limited all the time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm pretty sure that's my children's only focus is how big their voice can be. But like I said, there's so many things with parenting where I'm like, God, this is annoying right now, but I do not want to train it out of you. So I'm just going to live in agony for the next 6 years because it'll serve you well in the future. But it reminds me too of, you talk about how content and delivery are kind of reinforcing each other in this virtuous cycle, but you insist that we actually start with delivery and not content. Why? Don't we need to know what we're talking about first?
No. I answer with a single word because of course you have to know what you're talking about, of course. But I promise you, if you're listening to this pod, watching this pod, there's more benefit for you to derive by focusing on delivery for a while. Here's why. There's a very good chance that you have given it short shrift in comparison to content for your whole life. So it's kind of like undiscovered territory, uncharted territory. But number 2, most crucial of all, you have worked probably as hard as you can. Maybe you could squeeze a few more minutes or hours in somewhere, but you have probably worked as hard as you can to get better at content. And you can keep doing the same things, reading, polishing, practicing things, but you spend a lot of time thinking about the what. If you spend a little time getting better at the how, not only can you make everything you say sound much better because of the amount of voice you're using behind it, because of your comfort with posture and gestures and freedom and eye contact, not only will it sound better, but if you get into the virtuous cycle of good communication that I'm describing, you might even think of smarter stuff to say. So the content gets better too as a side benefit of unlocking more profound delivery. Now that's easier said than done. And that's why the book is like jam-packed with Lego blocks and finger walking and throwing wiffle balls against the walls and, filling up contact cases with drips of water from sinks. Like there's lots and lots of stuff there to do that very thing. But the principle is quite simple, really, quite easy, which is delivery can unlock even better content and make you sound great.
I did that public speaking program that I told you about, and it was intensive. It was about 6 months long. We had to go to another state 5 days at a time, like 6 different times for those 6 months. And I remember being so eager to learn. And one of the sessions each week was vocal coaching. And she'd have us do these silly things like have our fingers in our mouth while we were talking or all sorts of things. And it was just funny because in the beginning, I always internalized it almost as though it was a waste of time. Like, why am I doing this? And then when you'd see the transformation, like a volunteer would be called up, they'd be saying their lines with their fingers in their mouth or whatever it is. And then they'd take their fingers out of their mouth for the first time. it was like a different person on stage. Their voice sounded different. Their enunciation was different. It's like they went from amateur hour to professional in like a minute and a half. So people listening to this thinking, what can a wiffle ball do? Or I don't know the wiffle ball challenge quite yet, but they really, really, really work. But I'm curious because we've sort of covered that our voices are our bodies. And we've kind of broken them over time. Our breath is shallow. We get stuck in these thought suppression loops. So give me the first tool. What is the simplest thing someone can do today that will actually work?
I'm going to give you two, only because I want to now explain the wiffle ball since you mentioned that, because it's a powerful one. But the first one is an exercise that I call finger walking, and it cures a whole bunch of things all at once. The premise is incredibly simple. You walk your fingers across a table or desk or the top of your thigh or the arm of a chair, any surface you want to. And you choose each and every single word that comes out of your mouth. Now, if you're watching the video, I'm doing it right now a little bit so you can see. If you're just listening, that's fine too. You step your fingers forward, choosing each word. If you don't know what word to say, you pause until you do. You don't have to get hung up thinking, am I speaking syllable by syllable or word by word? Simply walk your ideas across the table. Only walk your hand in one direction, from the beginning of the table forward until your arm is fully straight. Once you've completed a thought, bring it back to the beginning and walk your fingers again. Now, be disciplined and rigorous with this. If you're saying 1,000 ums, if you're talking too quickly, it's not a problem with your brain. It's not even a problem with your mouth. It's a problem with your fingers. You are not specific enough with your fingers. So imagine your fingers are almost like the feet of a ballerina tiptoeing through a field of tulips and trying to avoid disturbing a single one. Now, why should you do this exercise? Well, one, this is the way to remove the unnecessary clutter in your language that you don't like but also like, sort of, kind of, basically, literally. Because the point about those words is not to get rid of them because they're a sin. Don't say The point is they are a side product of you not considering the words that come out of your mouth as much as you could. So this exercise forces you to actually consider what you're going to say. Number two, it automatically forces you to speak more slowly. And many people listening probably relate to this idea. I'm a fast talker, or I talk too fast, or things like that. And number three, with that exercise, it also tends to make you much briefer, because often you'll reach the point where your arm is all the way straight, your elbow is straight and locked, and you'll realize, I'm done. I don't actually have more that I need to say. The final reason it can be incredibly powerful for people is that every tool I teach in the book, I mentioned it can either be a performance exercise, meaning you can do it live in the actual event, or a practice one. This is, like rehearsal for music or the arts, or practice for sports. But this one, you can actually blend it because of what we're doing right now. You see my video here, but you don't know that I'm actually walking my fingers on the desk below this, what I call this digital cloak of invisibility below the camera's frame. So that would be the first thing that, and people can even try it right this second. If you're listening just for fun, here, walk your fingers and say out loud right now, wherever you are, one interesting thing you learned today from our conversation. Do it right now. That's an example.
I also find it pretty interesting that you say that filler language is only 3% of speech, but it actually takes 97% of mental energy. And I think most people have an idea that that's flipped. Like they're trying to save their mental energy, and so they're filling it in. So tell us more about that.
Are you going to dislike me for all eternity if I correct you?
Yeah.
Then I won't. Then I will say, Melissa, let me tell you about the wiffle ball drill, and I'm going to pivot to that, and we'll talk about that, because I would have to correct you otherwise.
No, correct me. I love being corrected.
If that section of my book is unclear, then allow me to set the record straight for the rest of eternity for everybody. I'm not suggesting that ratio. What I'm suggesting is, even if you said once every 5 seconds. If you map that to the total number of syllables that you speak, if you speak about 3 words per second, and average word is about 2 syllables per word, that math works out that one every 5 means only 3% of your total syllables are ums. And my point there is that that's not actually that big of a deal. It's bigger if you make the much more noticeable. So if you sing the like, that's a bigger deal, of course. But people often fixate on filler too much. So that's the math with a 97.3. Does that answer the question a little bit?
Yes, it does. Makes more sense.
Okay. Right.
I was like, that is mind blowing.
All right, good.
I blew my own mind with falsities. So
all right. Well, then just for kicks, then here's the wiffle ball drill. Okay. So we'll tack that one on because we didn't get to before. Wiffle ball is super simple. It's something I do with presidential candidates when we're working on debates. You ask someone a question. They're not allowed to answer until you throw them a ball. And it forces them to tolerate thinking time for a brief moment before they begin speaking. You can do this at home by yourself. Grab a ball that has some bounce to it. So racquetball, tennis ball, wiffle ball, and have someone ask you questions or use AI to do so. Get the question, throw the ball against the wall, catch it, and then you can speak, but not before. And you can experiment with rolling the ball, going farther away from the wall, closer to the wall, to extend that amount of time and build this muscle of tolerating silence before you speak. So that's another one people can, literally do as soon as they get done listening to this podcast.
Talk to us also about the 5 P's of vocal variety, because you say they're all interconnected and you can't change one without changing the others. So pace, pitch, pause, power, placement. God, man, P words are really satisfying to say. But if I'm someone, say, who has been told they're monotone their whole life, where would they start with that?
Thank you for reading the book. Thank you for accurately saying back the 5 P's, because I often get people getting the wrong P's in there somehow. Pace, pitch, pause, power, placement is a perfect place to go next in the conversation because it builds on what we were just saying. The wiffle ball essentially helps you pause. The finger walking helps you adjust pace. So pace is speed. Pause is silence. Power is just my word for volume. So that's loud and quiet. Pitch is music. High and low. So think of that like the note on a musical scale. And then placement is where the sound amplifies primarily in your body. So when you said to your husband, you're speaking in your throat too much. Remember that from our conversation like 15 minutes ago or whatever it was? Your vocal cords are right here, but they get amplified, and the amplification can happen all throughout the body. So as an example, if your voice is very nasal at times, what's going on is that sound is primarily amplifying in the mask of your face, as opposed to being varied throughout your entire communication instrument. These 5 P's work together. And you're right, in the book I say it's very hard to disentangle them. You can, but you have to work at it a lot. To your point about people who are monotone, the first thing to shift there is you are not monotone, by the way. That sounds as though it's a nationality or a familial role, like you are a father. No, you are not monotone. You were speaking in that moment in a monotone manner, or your voice was more monotone in that speech than it was in a previous one. You can think of monotone as uniformity. Same pitch, same pause, power, pace, placement, all of them together. Most of the time, we notice monotone the most with pitch variation. So rather than high and low, it's low the entire time and it never changes, and all we ever hear is one pitch like that, even if there are pauses, or louder, or quieter. The pitch stays the same. It's really hard for me even to do, to not have them all affect each other. So if you are monotone, and by that I mean if you habitually speak in a monotone manner, the answer is start with ever is easiest for you to change. So if it's easier for you to take some pauses and therefore allow more breath to come into your body, start there, because as soon as you get a little more breath, that's going to probably affect power. As it affects power, that will probably affect pitch. Pitch, power put together affects placement, and then you're off and running. You get the point. There's a different way to tackle this too, though. If you know of those 5 Ps, that one is the most difficult, you could also be a glutton for punishment and try to face that one head on. So if you know that you have really limited pitch variation when you speak, start there. And in the chapter on vocal variety is actually the longest in the whole book because I think it's that important of a topic. So in that chapter, I give a bunch of exercises for how to work on vocal variety. And the best one, the first one I teach, is something that ironically has nothing to do with sound. It's called silent storytelling. And what you do in this one is that you do just like the name of the drill suggests, you speak but silently. So think of yourself lip syncing basically. And you open your mouth, move your mouth the words, allow your face to be as expressive as possible, your hands to move because they probably have a story to tell too, almost like you were on a really excited, energized television show, but someone had turned down the volume. And practice speaking that way. No sound comes out of you. You move your mouth, move your face, move your hands, mouth the words of what you're saying. And then after you've done that for a few minutes, allow sound back into the equation, but keep doing all those other behaviors. Because if we take as true what you quoted from my book earlier, your voice is your body, it stands to reason if you change how your body's working, your voice changes too. And for many, many, many of my clients, this is almost like a magic button. You have to practice a lot though, because the button does magically transform, but then you have to practice a lot to build it into muscle memory.
Which is the fun part, honestly. If all change was easy, what would we even be doing with this life? We've got enough time to watch reality TV. You can practice on your inherent instrument. I personally think it's so cool. I love playing with my voice, still through singing, voices with my kids' books. Sometimes I'll just hear somebody singing in a certain way and I'll see if can try to match their style. I do it with even accents as well. I realized a long time ago that you can get better at a language if you first try to nail their accent and figure out where the tongue placement is. For example, some languages, they never bring their tongue back in their mouth, or their tongue is always kind of light and fluttery towards the front. And so when you notice all of these little things, you start to realize how much of an instrument this really is. It feels like it's like 20 instruments in one. And so I think people should bring play back, stop being so serious about it all. But you also say that, or you have a whole chapter on AI and the future of delivery. And here's my concern. If AI can generate perfect content and then deep fakes can deliver it with almost perfect presentation skills, what is the point of any human getting better at communication at this point?
I think it's an easy one. Well, it's not. We have to unpack it a little bit, but I think it's obvious that we should keep getting better at communication. Obvious. Not to insult the question, but rather to urge your listeners to grapple with where we are historically. So some of the more recent research about AI is quite concerning, actually, suggesting that kind of like the GPS in our phones, it will turn us into subcognitives, meaning we don't have to think. Don't have to have a sense of direction anymore. GPS works. I just get in my car, I drive, and it just takes me wherever. So much so that if the GPS takes you in the wrong direction, all of a sudden you're looking around like, wait, where? I'm totally lost. And then AI, in a way, could almost pose that same sort of threat, but just to cognition, to thinking itself. Because if we take your question further, it's like, well, not only do I not need to work on improving my communication, I don't need to work on communication, period. Go further than that. I don't have to think. It just does it for me. Awesome. Get to outsource all of that. And to your point and you just said this, that life is essentially an opportunity to practice some stuff. It's not just sitting there and watching reality TV. It's a chance to practice, to work on ourselves, to gain, grow, learn, improve. Then why on earth would we want to turn off our abilities of cognition? Now, if I sound like a doomer as opposed to an accelerant when it comes to AI, I do think I'm more in the doomer camp, but I'm not totally doom and gloom about the whole thing. I just think that we should be using it for where it can be revelatory and powerful and liberating, and not everywhere, because we have seen the unintended consequences of technology just run amok. Many, many, many different examples in human history. So I think adopting it just because we can makes things faster is a total fool's errand. Anyway, going further with that, I had to get on my soapbox a little bit about AI for a second there. We should still work on it because there's a very good chance that if you can speak well, that might in fact differentiate you from everybody else. If you're talking just very, very mercenary, like to get that job, to get the interview, whatever it might be. In fact, one of the big growth areas of my company, weirdly, is parents wanting to get coaching for their high school and college students, which I feel honestly a little conflicted about, because you think, well, why do kids need more coaching, more stuff? But yet, because of devices and how much time our kids spend speaking to screens as opposed to each other and socializing, parents are concerned that their kids actually have worse skill just speaking and interacting than they've seen in previous generations. So I think it is a very worthwhile thing to improve your communication. And yes, AI will probably make our content better and better and better. And I don't know what it will do to delivery. I don't. I still think it is a totally worthwhile human project to always try to become a little bit better each day at turning air into sound and sound into words to be of service to the other person.
I'm hoping, like with other things, it's like we get really excited about it. We get really fooled by certain things. Everyone wants to jump on it. And then we start to get irritated. We're like, no, I don't like watching AI videos. The moment I can tell it's somebody's AI twin, I just can't even finish it. I'm like, come on. I don't even care if this content is good. I'm not going to watch it. I'm going to support the real life humans out there. But it's kind of beautiful in a way, because I've noticed I actually love when I see a typo in somebody's content. I love when there's a blip in what they're saying, when they have to go back a little bit. And so I'm wondering if it's actually going to make what we used to consider mistakes or flaws more endearing, and we start to really enjoy each other's humanity a little bit more.
That's what I suggest in the chapter. And I've now taken that chapter. I wrote that chapter 2 years ago now, almost 2.5. I think it's aged pretty well. We'll find out, of course, as it keeps going. But I've now taken that chapter and turned it into a whole keynote about AI and the future of delivery. And I'm with you. I think there's a very good chance that not only do we do exactly what you're talking about, develop a further appreciation of the idiosyncrasy of humans, there's a world in which we almost use it as like a coded secret language where we indicate to each other in gentle, tiny, almost unnoticeable, subtle ways that like, hey, you're talking to a human, not a robot. Even as the robots try to adopt what we're doing. Like as an example, I was talking to ChatGPT a couple of weeks ago, and I said, hey, you just inserted an in your speech. You didn't need that, did you? And it says, just as AI does in a British accent to me for some reason. I don't know why it does that, but to me, it's like, oh, very good catch. You're right. I was doing that, adopting that to perhaps make this a bit more accessible for you. Did you like it? You know, like that. It was speaking back to me. So AI, in a way, tries to parrot back to us. So maybe it will adopt all the things you're talking about, but humans are tremendously resourceful creatures. And it may be that we adopt a bunch of those things exactly as a as a cue to each other. And I love that idea that maybe we become more appreciative of idiosyncrasy and humanity. You know, the chapter in the book on recovering from mistakes suggests the very same thing, that we always think a mistake is a threat. You know, to your point, a bobble, a this, or that. It's a threat. Oh my God, I wasn't perfect. And in the book, I actually give people 2 pages they can rip out, cut up, and use these little transparency phrases, these cards that say things like, let me go back a minute, or that wasn't quite what I meant. Let me try again. Or I could make that more concise. Here's a better way to say it. We do those sort of things in life all the time without even feeling self-conscious about them if we're really just focused on the other person. And yet when we make it all about us, you know, it's a big presentation, the big interview, whatever, They feel like a threat to our credibility, but they're just your humanity. And you can actually practice for that, build muscle memory, and desensitize the threat of those mistakes.
See, I'm wondering if you actually tell your AI, don't say, if it'll go into the same self-conscious cycle that humans do. All of a sudden, that's all it's saying.
Oh my God.
Well,
I should totally do that. Trying to sabotage the AI. That's weird. You got you're speaking at 3.2 words per second. Did you speed up for my benefit, or why was that?
You just tell it all these things not to do, and it just starts doing it, blipping out.
For sure.
Well, I love leaving listeners with one thing to think about or do this week. And I know we've already given so much actionable advice, but is there anything we've missed that you think could really just sort of ground this into their real life?
I do. Take one of the exercises you learned about in this podcast and try to explain it or teach it to someone else. And here's why. There is probably an objection, a little tiny objection in the back of your mind that says something like, oh, that's silly. Like Melissa said that people speak with their fingers in their mouth, and she even validated it. She even said it was really cool. And afterwards they enunciated totally differently. It was like a different person. They were amazing. Michael Hoeppner, this global communication expert, saying throw wiffle balls. That sounds silly. That's silly. It's stacking Lego blocks. It's not. This is called embodied cognition. You're using something besides just your big, powerful brain to learn new things and build positive habits. And if you are brave enough to actually take the exercise, try the exercise, and show somebody else, there's a very good chance you're going to realize this isn't silly at all. This is a way for me to improve my communication that avoids all those thought suppression and negative talk cycles. And not only that, it reinforces the idea that my core communication job is not me. My core job is to be of service to the other person. And maybe I can even teach them this exercise, and they can even benefit a little bit from it too.
Well, tell us about your book, what it looks like to work with you, and anything else that the listeners need to know.
For sure. The book is Don't Say and the subtitle is How to Communicate Effectively to Live a Better Life. You can find that anywhere books are sold, but you can also go to the website don'tsayum.com, which is a pretty easy website to memorize or remember. My company is GK Training. You can learn more about me, my work, and everything we do there. GK Training, all one word, gktraining.com. And if you want to reach out to me individually, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Want to work through this week's Mind Love Challenge with others? The Mind Love Collective is a free community with monthly themed calls, weekly challenge accountability, and real support throughout the year. So join us at mindlove.com/join. Thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.